Good afternoon and welcome to our Goizueta Inside the MBA Admissions Committee chat. We are going to be here today talking about the 1- and 2-year MBA programs here at Goizueta Business School. Thank you for joining us. This chat, of course, is interactive, and if you've ever been with us on a chat, you know that there's time for you to submit questions into the committee, and they'll be answering your questions as well as going through slides related to the admissions process as you're getting ready to ideally apply during the fall. So I am joined here on the chat today with two of our wonderful admissions directors. I will let them introduce themselves and then we'll get started.
Sure. Welcome, my name is Libby Livingston and I'm Director of Admissions for the 2-year program here at Goizueta, and we're glad that you're here with us today.
Hi, I'm Katie Lloyd. I'm Director of Admissions for our 1-year MBA program.
Great. So we're going to get started. I have the agenda up on the screen. We're going to talk about program class profiles and then go into what the committee considers and its process and its members. And then we'll talk about something everybody is always interested in, scholarships and how those decisions are made, and then details and timeline. Of course, if your question is not related to any of these things but is related to admissions, feel free to submit those in your chat window, and I'll make sure they get fielded to the ladies as they're talking here. And if we can't address your question on air at the time, we have folks behind the scenes who are feverishly typing and making sure that we get things answered here or follow up to you afterwards. And as well, just as housekeeping, a copy of the chat in its entirety and its slides will be provided to all of those who attend the chat today. So without further ado, I will let us get started by turning it over to Ms. Livingston.
Great. Well, first I want to share the profile of the class, and you can see from the slide that our 2-year and 1-year program profiles. And the 2-year class is typically between 150 and 160 students, and the 1-year class is usually about 40 to 50 students. You can see our average GPA, and that's undergraduate GPA record, as well as our Gmat range for each program and the years of work experience. So I wanted to start off the chat giving you the profile of the classes. Now I want to move to the admissions factors. We're going to kind of just jump right in and kind of go through the details of the admissions factors, things that we look for during the process. And we're going to go into detail kind of with these 7 different areas. But want to kind of touch on that we're talking about these in detail, but we look at the application as a whole. We do not have a weighted application process, so each piece is very important and we look at that holistically. And when you start the admissions process, it's a very self-reflective process. Time for you to kind of think about where you've been, why you want this advanced degree, and why now, and what you see yourself doing with that degree. I think it's great that you're attending events like this. I think it's very important to connect with schools, attend events, as well as do informational interviews, and also research different areas that you may be interested in studying for the MBA. I think that that's really key in preparing you for this process. We are going to go through the details, and I think that it's an opportunity really to share your story, and you're going to be able to do that through the different areas that we discussed today. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and she is going to talk about kind of the academic background, test scores, and work experience first.
Yes. Hello, good morning. Actually, good afternoon. To talk about the first 2, academic background and test scores, these are 2 pretty objective ways we have of looking at candidates. To begin with, we look at the rigor of your undergraduate program, where you attended your undergraduate, or where you went for your undergraduate education, any graduate coursework that you may have done, and what specific classes you may have taken within those programs. We do place an emphasis on undergraduate courses that have been analytical or quantitative in nature. We certainly like liberal arts students. That's absolutely fine to apply with a liberal arts background, but we do look for any quantitative or analytical courses that you've taken within your degree or degrees. We will look at your GPA. We ideally want to see progressive trends, positive trends. For instance, if you have experienced a decline, you may want to explain that in the additional essay, but ideally your grades have been consistently strong throughout. And then we do place most emphasis on your undergraduate GPA, although we will consider again any graduate coursework that you have completed. Additionally, any coursework or certifications that you've done, whether it be the CPA or CFA, that does come into our decision process as well. So please make sure you include that on your resume as well as in any discussions during the interview too. With regard to test scores, we do take the Gmat or the GRE. Either is accepted, and we view them both equally. I would put a little asterisk next to that. If you are thinking about consulting, I would encourage you to take the Gmat, because oftentimes within the consulting process, search process, some consulting companies will ask for a Gmat score. So that is kind of a personal decision, but that would be the only recommendation I would say, definitely take the Gmat if you're thinking of going that route. But looking at both those tests, we place most emphasis on the quantitative score for each of those exams. 50% or better is what we're looking for. If you decide to take the test multiple times, we will look at your highest score from either of the tests. We would encourage you, if you do decide to take the test multiple times, to stick with the same test. We do find that that enables you to really prepare in the same way and show more of an opportunity for raising that score on a second or a third attempt. We do also, we've gotten a lot of questions about the IR section on the Gmat, and we do look at that score. It is not a primary factor in our decision process, but we do pay attention to that score. So we definitely want you to prepare in a way that you're familiar with that section on the test. If you're interested and you have taken the GRE and want to see how that may convert to the Gmat, we don't have enough test takers to give you enough GRE test takers to give you an average, but you can look at the GRE to Gmat conversion chart on the ETS site, and that will give you an accurate projection of what the average range of your Gmat score may be. So that should give you an idea of how competitive your score is when we consider that in our application review. As far as work experience becoming a little less objective, we definitely want to see candidates who have between 3 and 7 years ideally, and the reason being is that's what recruiters are looking for, and so that's what's really driving our decision-making process. So if in addition to the time of your work experience, the number of years of work experience, we're looking for the quality of your work experience. Ideally, it's been progressive in nature. You've taken on more responsibilities, and that's indicated either by bullet points on your resume or also by title changes or by information conveyed in your recommendations. But ideally, you've been progressive within your job. And if you have switched jobs, you can also demonstrate that by moving on to a position with more responsibility. Ideally, you'll submit a one-page resume. This is the format that will be required once you go through the recruiting process at Goizueta. Certainly, if you have more than 10 years of work experience, it is common to see a two-page resume, but ideally you can get your resume down to one page. And once you are here on campus, we will help you do that, but ideally beforehand as well. With regard to the recommendations, we do require 2. Ideally, they're both professional in nature. Someone who knows you well from a professional standpoint, a current supervisor, a past supervisor, if you're not able to get a current supervisor, a client, someone you've worked with on an ongoing basis who really knows you well. Titles do not impress us as much as the quality of how well they know you and the interactions that they've had. And ideally, it'll corroborate what you've said in your essays as well as in the interview about what you can bring to the program and what you've been able to accomplish on the job. If you aren't here again able to get a supervisor, maybe indicate that to someone in the interview process or through the application process, because we do like to know why you might not be able to secure that. So I think those are the main factors the main points for academic background, test scores, work experience, and recommendations. So I'll pass it back to Libby so she can talk about the interview process.
Before we go to that, I want to make sure we tackle some of the questions that have come in, and these
Sure.
have been great. I'm going to go ahead and take us back to the first slide, and I apologize if you have any delay on the slide movement. Just give it a few seconds. You should be seeing the very first slide regarding the academic factors, which talks about admissions factors, which talks about academic background and test scores. So in the area of academic background, you mentioned rigor of undergraduate program and being able to show that you've tackled strong work. Liberal arts is fine, but definitely wanted to make sure you've tackled some of that analytical work. If you don't have that rigor from your undergraduate program, what types of things, alternatively, could you show that can demonstrate your that you understand and have handled the rigor of those types of things outside of the classroom?
Sure. Well, a strong test score, either a GRE or a Gmat, can give you that balance. Ideally, somewhere in your application, we need to have a good understanding of how you're going to be able to handle the rigor of our academic program. So it needs to come through your academic experience, through your test scores, or through the rigor of your work experience and the analytical, perhaps, nature of your work experience. If you have a hard time demonstrating it through one of those ways, through the academics, through the test score, or through your professional work, then I would say maybe taking some additional courses outside of what your current experience is to help strengthen your candidacy. But we're willing to talk to you on a one-to-one basis on what that may look like to you. But typically, I would say additional coursework may be a good idea if you can't demonstrate it in one of those other three ways.
Great. In terms of test score, there are a couple questions about number of times to take the test. I know you were saying people take it more than once. I mean, that's not uncommon. Right. How often, like what's the average number of times our applicants are taking the tests? And then how would you recommend that somebody go about kind of scheduling or determining enough time to schedule themselves to take it once, be able to apply, and then possibly need to take it again? What's your recommendation?
Sure. Well, I would say, based upon your initial score, if you take it one time and you're far off what our range is, then you're going to need to devote some significant time to preparing. If you're close to our range or want to make your score a little bit stronger to be more competitive, then you may not need as much time. So it's more of a personal decision and knowing how well you study for those types of tests and how much time you'll need. But I would definitely allow at least 2 months to prepare for the test and take the test, because it takes about 10 to 20 days for us to get the official score, which we'll need in order to complete your application. So by the time you actually schedule the test, take the test, prepare for the test, get the score, about a 2-month time period is ideal. Now you can submit your application with a current score that you have and let us know that you'll be retaking the test, and we can hold the decision until we have that second test or that third test. As far as the number of ideal times to take the test, I would say if you get a score on the first time that you take it and you're not satisfied with that, you owe it to yourself to take it again. If you think that you can do better, which we would hope that you could improve, you owe it to yourself to sit for another test. Ideally, I would say after 3 tests, we really don't see much significant change, unless you took the test several times several years ago and now you're taking it again for a 4th or 5th time, but it's been in the several year lapse. So I would say on average we see about 2 to 3 test scores from candidates, but it's really an individual decision on how many times and how long it would take you to prepare.
I was just going to add one thing, that not only are you being considered for admission, but you're also being considered for scholarship. So as Katie mentioned, if you take the test but you think you're capable of a better score, I encourage you to take the test again, because you can also be considered for scholarship opportunities.
Absolutely. I think it's worth it to kind of mention that anything that you can do that strengthens the application, again, to your point, if you can take the time to be able to plan for that, I think the committee not only likes to see that, but likes to see that people are presenting as complete of an application as possible. So in terms of moving forward from the test scores into the area of work experience, there were lots of questions on this. You put up very briefly at the beginning, Libby, kind of the average profile. And so I think people know that the average candidate is going to fall within the range of 3 to 7 years, and they're going to have a kind of more traditional type backgrounds. But there are folks on both sides. So let's talk first about individuals on the lower side of work experience. If you're looking at it, if an individual has a year or 2 years of work experience, would you recommend that they apply, or would you recommend that they would wait? Is there anything that they can do that helps to strengthen their interest or their attraction for the committee as they're looking through that process for either of the 2 programs?
Sure. Well, I think that someone can be prepared to go to business school, after 2 years. Someone may not be ready after 10 years. It really just depends. And I think you've got to look at the quality of the work experience. If you're really, progressing and you feel like that you're kind of at a point where, I really need this MBA now, then it's probably the right time. And I think that if you do have less work experience, sharing some of your internship experiences can be really helpful that you had during undergrad. And kind of put that information on your resume, because that can, we don't count that as official full-time work experience, but it's definitely experiences that you've had that you'd be able to contribute into the classroom. And we also look at work experience based on when you will enroll. So if you have 2 years now, by the time you enroll in the 2-year program, you would have, about 3 years of experience. So definitely keep that in mind as well.
Very helpful.
Yeah, I think here again, it depends. Some candidates are ready for the MBA program at 2 years. We see very few candidates with less than 2 years. Here again, going back to what recruiters are expecting of candidates, and even if you do have 2 years coming into the program and you are ready, you may not, when you look at the average salary of what our students are getting when they graduate from the program, you may not be in that same pool or that same echelon as some of our other candidates who have more work experience. So just keeping that in mind, and you really want to go back to get your MBA at a time that you can maximize the degree the most for you. So for some candidates, it may be that you hit a wall at 2 years, or you've been in a rotational program that ends at 2 years and it's the right time, or 2 to 3 years. So it may be the right time for you. But for other candidates, think about, you really want to leverage the experiences and go back at the time that makes the most sense, that's going to give you the best accelerated options once you're finished with the degree. So it really depends. But I would say consider what your post-MBA goals may be as well.
And before we leave the kind of younger side of the scale, I do know that for a test-taking standpoint, you're less years of work. Even if you're not applying at the moment, it may be better for you to take your test as soon as, closer to when you have left your graduate or undergraduate program to be able to get the score. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to apply in that same year. Your tests are valid
for 5 years.
For 5 years. So that is one thing to consider in that. But to both the ladies' points, I think it really is an individual thing. But class profiles are averages, and so they're presented for that reason. So understand that there are people on both sides. So let's discuss a little bit the other side. So individuals that are coming with, somewhere closer to 9, 10, 11 years of work experience, does that work against them if they're showing that progressive work experience, good background? Does that work against them in the admissions process? And if so, are there things that they can do to sort of to address that as well?
Well, I think it's how you present yourself and how you tell your story. It's very important to be very clear about why the MBA is important to you at this particular juncture of your life. And so if you've been, just hard charging and haven't been able to stop and breathe, and now you're at a point where you really see that the MBA would make a difference in your career, and you're very focused on what you want to do with the MBA, then I think that you're not penalized. However, if you're looking at the MBA as more of as an opportunity to explore once you've reached kind of that 10-year mark, then it does become a little bit harder. We really need, we need focus at every age, but especially once you are progressing in your career, having that intentional focus is very important.
Wonderful. I think that's really helpful to be able to understand kind of both sides of the extreme and what you're presenting from a candidacy standpoint. So talking about the last portion of this in terms of the resume and other portions, you mentioned that that's something that they will have to have in a one-page format when they get in the program, but that you want to condense that as best as possible. Now, given we want you to tell a lot about yourself, individuals have a hard time sometimes leaving things off. A couple of tips you can give. What would be some of the things you would say can help to trim down those resumes so individuals can feel like they're leaving substance without taking off anything that's really valuable for them, and still be able to be in compliance, if you will?
I think it's really important to have deliverables. So if you were able to achieve any kind of sales quotas or any type of financial deliverables, that's very important to keep. Anything that isn't descriptive and really tells what your job was, what you accomplished or what you were actually contributing, you could probably narrow that down. We definitely want to see any a nice brief summary of your extracurricular activities would be great as an undergraduate student, or what you're doing now. So I definitely would leave that in, but maybe giving a close look at what your professional experiences have been and what you've achieved, and really focusing on those achievements and deliverables underneath the professional section. I think that's really important. The other thing is if you please don't leave off experiences that would indicate that you've had work gaps, because that will leave questions in our minds. So make sure that you're comprehensive. You don't have to go into as much detail on the resume for our perspective, because we do have a very thorough application on you, and it's just more seen as a talking point in the interview, as well as kind of a summary of your achievements and accomplishments in the application process. So I think just trying to focus on what your deliverables would be professionally, and then also making sure you include your educational and extracurricular accomplishments, for me, would be most important.
Great. So before we leave the area of factors, you have recommendations here, and I know you mentioned you are looking at professional recommendations, people who can speak to your work experience. And for a number of reasons, individuals can't always have their current boss or even somebody who's at their company recommend them. What are some of the acceptable other recommenders that would exist? So if there's a past professor that someone has worked with, or an individual who's a colleague from a former job that wasn't necessarily in a supervisory role, what are the kind of individuals that would be acceptable? And then more importantly, which ones are just absolutely not acceptable in terms of an alternative if you don't have your immediate boss to be able to do so?
I mean, I think past managers or supervisors can be great options. And you could use a colleague if that could be helpful. And I think professors, not so much. I mean, we definitely want to have professional recommendations from your work experience. I know sometimes we get questions about entrepreneurs. You know, it is fine to get a client, someone that you've worked with closely to recommend you as well. We do not want the CEO of the company to write your recommendation if that person has not had any contact with you. They're not going to be able to provide examples and really talk about the impact that you've made within that organization. So it's really, you need to get someone that has managed or supervised you in your current role or a past position. You know, I think that sometimes if people are having difficulty, they can get a colleague that they've worked in a team environment with. That can be helpful as well. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, we actually see quite a few recommendations come in from family members or who know your family, and that is a big don't, I would say, in the application process, because it really, it calls into question your judgment, because here again, we're giving you the advice that we really want someone who knows you in a professional capacity. And so here again, the titles, the connection really doesn't make a difference to us as much as the substantive quality of your work experience and how that recommender can attest to that. The exception to that would be if you want to supply a third recommendation, and if there's an alumni who's maybe given you good advice about applying to the program or has been a strong advocate about the Emory or Goizueta experience, that would be a great third recommendation. Or if you've been really involved in a community endeavor, that would also make a great third recommendation. But we really want to see, for those two first primary recommendations, we want to see professional recommendations. If you are a joint degree candidate, though, sometimes then a faculty member might be appropriate. But otherwise, professional recommendations all the way.
Great. And then while you mentioned the joint degree element, right before we leave this last section, individuals who are looking at joint programs who might have different backgrounds, so you're looking at being JD MBA or MBA and PH programs, they may not necessarily have the traditional business backgrounds, and that was attractive when they were looking sort of at the law and public health side, but maybe not as effective on this side. How would you suggest that they recommend addressing that in the application side if they don't have that rigorous work experience to share, but are interested in that dual process?
Sure. I mean, I think that, you know, students that are doing dual degrees sometimes don't have the, you know, a lot of work experience, but we definitely want you to talk about the work experience that you do have. From your internship experiences, maybe you have a family business experience. We definitely want to hear about you know, the experiences that you can share in class and on teams. And so definitely take some time to, you know, share the information that you do, because I think sometimes we find that students that don't have a lot of work experience maybe try to pull from more of their club activities, which we definitely want to hear about your club experience, your extracurricular activities. But when it comes to, you know, kind of the work experience, definitely focus on internship and other summer work that maybe you've had.
Great. Okay, I'm going to let us move on to the next slide. I know we're still talking about admissions factors, and in this case, we are in the process of looking at essays. Sorry, I'm moved the slides around a lot. Your slides should say essays. I apologize. And please continue to submit questions. You guys have been great. We're making sure we're taking care of them both on camera and off camera. So if you don't see it answered immediately on here, you should expect that somebody behind the scenes is following up. So I will turn it back over to you ladies and talk about essays.
Super. Thank you. So we're going to talk about essays. We require 4 essays, and we also have 1 optional essay. And we really want you to spend time on your essays, because we do read your essays. And we encourage you to follow the directions. We have, you know, specific questions that we are asking, and we want you to address those questions. And we also would love for you to stay within the word limits. And we're reading a lot of applications, and there's a reason that we have these word limits. We want you to be able to be concise and succinct in a, you know, certain amount of words. So that's really important. Also, definitely proof your essays. I think sometimes it's helpful to have someone that, knows you well, to be able to review your essays. They can really kind of share, oh, your personality came through. It really, talks about, you as a person and your experiences really well. And then maybe have somebody that doesn't know you as well review it to see if there's any gaps that maybe seem missing. Or give it to someone without the question, see if they can guess what the question is. So definitely have someone proof your essays. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the optional essay. We have talked about sometimes, hey, I can't get a recommender, my supervisor, to do my recommendation because of specific reasons. This is a good place to maybe share that information. You can kind of share in the optional essay why you've selected the 2 recommendations that you have. Maybe you have a semester in undergrad that you didn't perform as well as you would have liked. This is a great place to share, the information about why that happened and why that's not going to happen at the graduate level. When you get to the end of your application, if you feel that there's something that you have not had the opportunity to share with us, the optional essay is a great place to do that. If you do not need to share anything, do not just fill out the optional essay with a statement that you want to, share. That's not what it's needed. That's not what it's for. That's not needed. So definitely, just use that space if you have an extra explanation that you need to give to the committee. Also want to touch on leadership. I know that Katie talked about that with the resume. We're definitely interested in seeing leadership opportunities that you've been able to take advantage of. Maybe it's in extracurricular activities that you did during undergrad. Or currently in the community, or maybe you're involved in a group within your work. We definitely want to see this information. We actually have sections within our application for you to complete and list this information, and we really do want you to list it on the application. Don't just skip that and put it on your resume. We'd like it actually in both places. So complete the sections of the application as well as list it on your resume. And then I want to talk about the interview. The interview is probably one of our favorite parts of the application process is interviewing candidates. And this is a great time for you to really, share your story with us, kind of, where you've been, why you want this degree, and why now is a good time, and what your goals are. And kind of looking at our process, I want to touch on that first. We have open interviewing on campus until November 20th. We also have opportunities to interview off campus. We visit a lot of different cities, domestically and internationally, so you can check out our worldwide recruiting calendar, and you can request an interview in one of those cities. You just need to submit a resume, and spots do get filled up, so I encourage you to do that soon if we're going to be in a city within the next month or so. We also, with a candidate that doesn't interview with us in the open interview period or when we're visiting a city, once you submit your application and it's a completed application and we've reviewed it, we can invite you to interview at that time. And all of these requests kind of for interviews can be done online. And I did want to mention that not all individuals are invited to interview. So it is possible that a wait list or a denied decision could be rendered before an interview has taken place. So some tips kind of on the interview. The interview typically lasts about 30 minutes, and it is going to be completed by an admissions director or one of our alumni that have been trained, and either one of those interviews is viewed the same by the committee. So we have opportunities to interview with our alumni. On Saturdays we have some open houses, and the directors as well. So both are viewed in the same way. And I encourage candidates to prepare for the interview like a job interview. You definitely want to kind of rehearse. You want to practice, but you don't want to sound too rehearsed. I think that a lot of individuals are in your life, or your friends or your colleagues are probably asking you, why are you pursuing this MBA? Well, take that as an opportunity to share with them, kind of why you're doing this and why now, why at Goizueta Business School, and kind of prepare you for that interview experience. And I think it's good to come to the interview with a couple of questions that maybe you haven't been able to locate on the website. There's a lot of information on our web, but spend some time thinking about some really kind of thoughtful questions that you could ask us to get our perspective on before the interview concludes.
Great. So we've got lots of very good interview questions. So before you leave this space, let me make sure that that we're tackling all of those particularly. So one of the first and earliest questions is in terms of what you're looking for in the interview. Are there elements of an individual's background, whether it be leadership or whether it be their interest or whatever else, that really needs to come through in the interview? I know you don't want them to be rehearsed, right? You don't want them to sit home and practice a script, but you do want them to be able to be focused in 30 minutes. What are some of the things that you're really looking for that you want to make sure in the 30 minutes candidates are mindful of delivering?
Sure. Well, I know that, when we kind of start off the interview, we want to, kind of get a brief overview of your experience and, take 2 or 3 minutes, brief, because we have lots of other questions that we want to get to during our conversation. So I think it's important to kind of watch your time. Sometimes people, can kind of go on and on about each detail of their positions and work experience. So definitely think about, being able to do it in a succinct way. You always hear about, kind of your 30-minute elevator pitch. Think about a 2 to 3 minute overview kind of your work experience, I think is helpful when you come into the interview. But I encourage candidates to really be authentic. You want to be yourself. We're going to want to hear about your past experiences, why, the MBA, what are your goals, and why at Goizueta. We want you to spend some time about, why our program is a good fit for you. I think that those are things that are really important to us. I don't know if Katie has anything to add.
Great. In terms of the process, are individuals able to request interviews at international locations? And if they do, does it matter when they request it based on the round that they're looking to apply? So if they want to request an interview now, but they know they're not applying until later, is that fine?
Well, you can request now. It's open interview, and if you don't apply till round 3, that's okay. We keep your interview on file. We encourage you to be proactive and to interview with us. Come on campus or meet us in a city, and you have those opportunities until November 20th. So.
And then for interviews outside of the U.S., I know you all have mentioned other manners by which you do them, sometime by Skype or web or anything else. Is there any reason why anybody should not want to do an interview in that manner or that styling? I'm assuming you guys provide them for that reason. So can you talk a little bit about those interviews that are not necessarily done in person?
Sure. We, ideally would love to meet you in person, but we realize that's not always possible. So, it's great that we have the opportunity to do web interviews. We use Skype currently to conduct those interviews, and they go really well. It's so nice to be able to, interact with someone, see them on the screen and ask questions, and we have found that those work really well. So if you're unable to meet us in person, that is okay. We do have the option for the web.
As you can see, we're really good on camera, so they have no problem with that element of it. Are there any things that that candidates can do to help to ensure that they can get an interview? I know it's extremely competitive. This is a very competitive program, and so making sure they put their best foot forward to be granted an interview. Are there any things that they need to make sure that they do to try to fall within that open campus timing?
Absolutely. I think you need to be proactive in looking at our site and seeing when you can actually interview, whether it be on campus or off campus, or when we'll be in certain cities. Ideally, you'll request that interview online through our website early on, and your resume. Here again, we're basing our decisions based upon our availability and your resume. So hopefully you'll have a resume that can tell your story in a way that will make us want to interview you. But ideally, you're submitting it well in advance too, because we do have a lot of demand when we are traveling for interviews. So it's a lot about timing and being proactive.
And then in terms of signing up for an open interview, should an individual sign up right away and then apply, or should they wait to see if they're invited to interview after submitting their online application? What would be a good recommendation?
I would be proactive and interview with us.
I think the theme is proactive. So I know there's a lot of questions about making sure that's the right way to handle it. You guys are doing the proactive thing now and joining chats and being involved in the process. So the more that you can show that you're committed to the process and to the school at hand, I think it doesn't at all ever hurt you. In terms of the number of interviews an individual can be granted, is there only one? One.
Well,
typically,
yes, you will be granted one interview. In some cases, we may ask you to interview with us again. I would say it is less than 1% of our candidates have that happen to them. But
do individuals who are resubmitting or reapplying have to interview again?
No, they
Okay.
do not.
They
Some
do not
choose to.
So you can choose, that would be
You can
another instance
proactively choose to.
of when you would interview twice, proactively, making sure you're doing that. But so that's an instance where you could possibly interview twice if you are a re-applicant.
That's
correct. Okay, great. And then as you're looking about this, and you've talked about a lot of different areas, we talked about essays and interview and Gmat and these other portions. I know we're getting ready to leave the factors, so I want to make sure we still leave enough time to talk about the other meat of this. Is there a weight given to any part of it? I know it's not an overall, you look at them all evenly, but if somebody were looking at where they're going to spend their time, is there a place you would recommend that they put their more time and effort into the application? Assuming that you are all spending rigorous amounts of time doing this application from start to finish.
Right.
Where would you recommend that be the best place for them to spend their additional time?
We need to be sure that candidates are academically prepared for our program. To be successful, it's a very rigorous academic experience. So, we need to be sure that, you need to be sure to be able to show us that you are prepared for the rigor of our program.
Fabulous. Keep your questions coming in. Again, if we don't answer them still on air, we can field them off air as we get ready to move on. But I do want to make sure I'm leaving enough time for us to address the next section, which I think will be of significant interest, because we're going to talk a little bit about the one-year MBA and some of the key distinctions there. Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the great things about Goizueta, and makes us very distinctive in nature for some of our peer institutions, is that we have the option to do either the 2-year full-time program or the 1-year full-time program. You can apply to both programs simultaneously if you're unsure of which program may be about the best match for you, and you're considering both programs. You just need to indicate on your application which program might be your preference, and that will help us in our decision-making process. Ideally, you would be accepted to both programs, and the decision would be yours, and you could seek counsel at that time. But ideally, if you're thinking about both, then we encourage you to apply to both. Some of the distinctions that make a candidate a better fit for the 1-year program include if you have an undergraduate degree in business, economics, engineering, or a strong quantitative background, that is preferred in the 1-year program, because we do move forward through the core curriculum at a little bit quicker pace than in the 2-year program. We want to make sure that our students have a strong foundation in the academics and in the quantitative classes. So that is one distinguishing factor. The other distinguishing factor is really your focused goals, and if you are able to accomplish those goals in 1 year without the need of summer internship. So some post-MBA jobs, including investment banking, brand management, some of those are better suited for the 2-year program, because those companies, or a lot of those companies, hire out of their summer intern pool. Now, it's not to say that we haven't had students be successful in those spaces, but typically, if you're thinking about perhaps one of those two paths, you are better suited to go through the 2-year program. Additionally, we see a lot of joint degree candidates coming through our 1-year program, sponsored candidates coming through our 1-year program, entrepreneurs, students focused in real estate, healthcare, although we do see a good number coming through the 2-year program as well. Those students are really well suited for the 1-year program. As far as what makes our 1-year program distinctive, we have what's called the Goizueta Summer Experience. And what kicks off, we start in early May, so put that on your calendars. It is a little bit of a departure from the traditional 2-year program as far as the timing. You start in early May, and you'll have foundations courses as well as a week-long orientation session that really allows you to get to know your classmates very well. You'll get to know your teams. All of our students are put on teams during that first week. It's a good opportunity to get to know yourself better. We'll have some leadership and some outdoor challenges. It's a great way to kick off the year. And then you go right into the summer academic experience, and it's divided into 2 blocks. You'll be doing 5 core classes in each of those blocks. In addition to a career search process, all of what is covered for the most part in the 2-year program over the course of the first 2 semesters is covered during the summer experience for our 1-year students. So there's big emphasis on the academics as well as the career search as well as the social. We do have a lot of social opportunities for our students to engage not only with each other, but within the Atlanta community, from Braves outings to different festivals and summer events here in Atlanta. So it's a great opportunity to experience Atlanta and Goizueta during the summer. The conclusion of the summer, in addition to the core classes, you're also working on a project through one of our classes called Management Practice, which you're working on a project for an actual client, and you are at the end of your summer experience delivering those projects for that client, which is a great way to kind of tie the practical and the theoretical together. at the beginning of the fall semester, which happens at the end of August for us, there is an integration process for our 1 and 2 year students, and there's about 50 students as we talked about in the 1 year program, and about 160 students within the 2 year program, and the two are joined together through a week-long or almost week-long experience known as Keystone. And so there's different events that are social, self-reflective, team building, social service. We do a community project out in Atlanta that really engages our students with each other, but also the community. So it's a great way to integrate the two programs. And then once August begins, you're taking electives with the 2 year program, and there's no distinction between the 2 year and the 1 year programs at that point. So that's just a little bit of an overview about the 1 year program. It's a great option for students who are really looking to accelerate their career and who don't need that summer internship to reach their goals.
Great. Before we move on, I definitely wanted to field some questions. There are a couple of people who wanted to talk and understand a little bit more about the 1 year program. And so one of the first questions was specifically around how do you view differently 1 year prospects or 2 year prospects? I know you mentioned some of the things about what makes good sense for you. If you're interested in certain careers, you should probably do a 2 year versus a 1 year, if you're, and which ones have strong success there. But when you're looking at a candidate who's applied to both, are there elements in which you're evaluating them differently that should be considered to the prospect on that side?
Right. Ideally, you'd be a strong candidate for both, and then the choice would be yours, and it would just be the format that you wanted to undertake. So with the 1 year program, the disadvantages to the 1 year program, you can't do a summer internship, you cannot study abroad for a semester. So those are the two downsides. So if you're planning on studying abroad, that you definitely need to go to the 2 year program. If you, again, are thinking about brand management or investment banking, it's likely you're better suited for the 2 year program as well. It really boils down to your career choice and if you'll be able to achieve your goals within the 1 year program. If you have certain skill sets or experiences are well suited for making a transition or or accelerating your current career. For instance, we have a lot of students who come in with an engineering background and are very successful in making the transition to consulting. We have a number of students who come in with accounting backgrounds and are very successful in making the transition to corporate finance. So there are transitions that you're able to make, but it's more about the skill set that you'd be able to bring and the focus that you have.
Great. And in terms of that, you mentioned a lot about the summer experience. I think that talks a bit about what the first semester looks like and how very different that is in the 1 year versus 2 year. Libby, can you talk a little bit about the schedule, if you will, for the beginning of the 2 year side of the house, so individuals considering both can hear that. But also, if you guys can talk a little bit about kind of the schedule and sort of how, and there's a rigor in the summer that I really want to make sure candidates are understanding what that's like, and also how that's done slightly different in the 2 year side of the house. So could you talk a little bit about that, Libby?
Sure. So the 2 year program, we start actually at the end of July, so it's a little bit earlier. Our first semester is a 15-week semester, and the other semesters are 12 weeks, so it's a little bit longer. And we start off similar to the 1 year, where we have a kind of 1 week where you come and you do kind of foundation courses. So kind of prepare you for the program, the core courses, and these are classes that you might take if you've not had statistics or financial accounting, macroeconomics. We give you the opportunity to take some courses over the summer, just online through MBA Math, and then you come in person for that week and sit in on sessions with our faculty. Then we transition into the week-long orientation. And then we start classes, and our core is done in 15 weeks, where in the 1 year program, the core is done in 10 weeks. So it's definitely condensed and accelerated in the 1 year. With the 2 year, it's 3 blocks. And then once you're at the end of that semester, you transition and start taking electives. So I think that in both of our programs, your core is done in the first semester, and then you start taking electives. And in the 2 year program, you have about 14 electives, and in the 1 year, you have 10 electives. So lots of opportunity, and that's the time where you really get to take courses that interest you. We have students do more than one concentration. You can take 3 to 4 classes to do a concentration, so it's really easy. You don't declare anything. It's a lot of students will focus in a particular area, but it's your chance to take classes that interest you. And something that I did want to mention is that each spring semester, for the 1 year as well as the 2 year students, you have the opportunity to do a mid-semester module trip. or class. So some students will choose to stay in Atlanta and take kind of a mini elective, but a lot of our students will actually go and travel. We usually offer 3 to 4 different international trips each year, and students have the opportunity to travel with a faculty member that leads this trip and gets to learn about business in that particular region. And so those are great opportunities. I know we talked about the one-year students can't study abroad for a semester, but having opportunities like this that are 10 to 14 days long allows you to really get that international exposure and experience.
Right, and there's another question about that, sort of the experiences in the one-year program based on timing, not necessarily being able to have some of the same. I think there's a lot that is provided in there that is the same. It may not be the same length or durations of some of those things, but if you can talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities that one-year students see during their entire program, sort of more along, if you can't study abroad, but what kind of international travel is available for them, what kind of career travel or treks or things that may have been kind of highlighted from a one-year side, from a two-year side that also still exists for 1 years.
Sure. Well, with regards to the international exposure, Liberty, I think, covered the mid-semester modules, and that's our best opportunity. There's also some opportunities to travel during the year. They change from semester to semester. We've had sessions, week to 10-day long sessions on doing business in Brazil, doing business in Argentina, doing business in Israel, and our one-year students are able to take advantage of that in addition to the mid-semester modules. So there are some opportunities to engage in experiences outside the U.S. It's just you're not able to do that semester-long study abroad. As far as other options for the one-year program, it's during the summer session. We are exposing our students to career search practices through the business library, through the CMC, through Career Management Center. They're getting a lot of sessions and preparation on how to write a resume, how to interview, how to do a career search, and so they're really up to speed by the time the fall rolls around. And then they have full opportunity to take advantage of any of the electives, also GALA, which is Goizueta Advanced Leadership Academy. And that's another great opportunity for our one-year students to participate in something that I think is pretty unique to Goizueta. So there's no differentiation once that fall semester hits.
And then lastly, before we leave, there have been some questions about career prospects from 1 year and 2 year side. I know we're not getting into that. We're talking a lot more about admissions, but just briefly talking about sort of career opportunities for 1 year students different from 2 year students in terms of regions or types of jobs. I know you mentioned some that require internships, so would not necessarily be a good fit. But can you just address some of the, or kind of address that there aren't very many differences in the career prospects for 1 year and 2 years here or anywhere else in the country?
Yeah, there aren't really differences. I think we spoke about brand management and investment banking, so that's some slight differences. Although again, we have had students who have been successful, some students who have been successful in gaining positions in those spaces. But for the most part, it's again, you are once the fall semester hits, you are fully integrated with the 2 year program, and the recruiting season kicks off in early September, even mid-August. So our students are here, and over the summer we have specific 1 year recruitment events that go on, and so sometimes our 1 year students are even ahead of the game in having exposure to some companies. So it's really, I think that the students have the same opportunities. Some students may take a little bit longer to secure their final positions. So when you look at our statistics at graduation, they aren't exactly the same as 3 months out, but if you look at 3 months after graduation, the statistics are almost parallel. And we have very high placement rates for both programs. So again, a lot of students aren't necessarily securing positions as early on, but very, very successful in securing positions that they're very happy with come 3 months out.
Great. Fabulous. I'm going to go ahead and move us to the admissions decision process and deadlines. I know I want to make sure that we still have time. We've got about 15 minutes. And again, keep submitting your questions. If we can't get to them on air, we'll make sure we handle them behind the camera or afterwards. So with that, we'll turn to deadlines.
Yeah. So I'll just go over the deadlines briefly because you can find all of this information on the web. I guess the most important thing to notice is that we do have 4 rounds. The first round, the application deadline is next week, October 11th, and you will receive a response by early December. This round is really geared towards candidates who are focused on attending Goizueta and are really able to make their decision very quickly because the deposit deadline is December 20th. So you will have a very tight turnaround time to make that decision. So other than that, round 2, round 3, we'll see a lot of great qualified applications come in. We will consider Libby will talk a little bit more about the scholarship process, but your scholarship process your scholarship opportunities are definitely maximized by applying in round 2, although you will be considered fully for many opportunities in round 3. Round 4, we tend to see a lot fewer candidates in round 4, although we every year see great candidates come in at that time. It's just dependent upon how many spots we have remaining in the class. But we do encourage you certainly to apply by round 3, and if some circumstances aren't permitting, to apply by round 4. The other thing that I would encourage you to consider is make sure that you are able to submit all of your application materials by the deadline. We will not be able to complete your application until we have all of those pieces. So just in keeping in mind which round may be the best for you, it's when you can submit all the pieces as well as what you feel is most representative of your candidacy and your strongest at the time that you feel your candidacy is strongest. So I think that's probably it with regard to rounds. I don't know, Libby, if there's anything that I missed. So, okay, well, I'll pass it on to Libby, and she can talk a little bit more about the admissions committee and who sits on the admissions committee.
Great. So want to kind of give you an inside look to the admissions committee and share a little bit of information with you on who actually sits on the committee. So we have 6 admissions directors, associate directors, assistant directors that sit on the committee, as well as our associate deans actually for admissions, as well as the program office, as well as the career management center. And when you look at the directors that are reading and reviewing your applications, we have 75 years of cumulative experience, admissions experience. So definitely have read a lot of applications and reviewed a lot of transcripts, and definitely enjoy reviewing your applications. When we're in the admissions committee, typically a reader is going to present the file, and the interviewer will provide insight as well. We do have alums that interview, and we get their insights on your candidacy. And then we have a discussion that, on this particular candidate, and then, we reach a decision. And if that decision is a favorable decision, an admit decision, at that time we also consider them for scholarship. Does this candidate merit a scholarship? And I'm going to get into that here in just 1 minute. And then, as Katie mentioned, she went through the deadlines. There's a notification date, and that is the date that you'll be notified of your decision. Through our OPUS system, it will be listed there for your decision within that round. And then, really kind of looking at the scholarship process. A lot of candidates are interested in scholarship, and we have some great scholarship opportunities. And I know Katie mentioned round 2 is a great round to apply for, especially if candidates want to be considered for our named scholarships. We do have a lot of, kind of great named scholarships from companies or donors that we consider candidates for. And then in round 3, all candidates that apply by that date are going to be fully considered for scholarship as well. And scholarships are merit-based. They are not need-based. We get that question a lot, so we're just going to be looking at your application and looking at the candidate and saying, does this candidate merit a scholarship? And basically the areas that we look at closely is your academic potential, looking at your undergraduate GPA as well as your test scores, the quality of your work experience, the progression that you've shown, the impact that you've made within your company or your organization, as well as your leadership, leadership within your job, but also leadership in co-curricular activities that you've been involved in. Leadership is very important to us. We want our scholars to be leaders on campus, and so that is something that we look at closely. And really just the overall application. We're looking at all different aspects in considering you for scholarship. The decision, scholarship decision, is notified when you get your admission decision. So if you, get your admission decision, if you've received a scholarship, will be notified at that time. The scholarships range from about $5,000 up to full tuition. It really varies. I mean, the full tuition scholarships are extremely competitive. Our most prestigious scholarship is our Woodruff Scholarship, and it is a full tuition scholarship plus a $10,000 stipend, and we have 4 of those that we award each year. The scholarships are non-negotiable. We review these scholarships. We spend a lot of time, and that is, our offer to you. And if you will maintain that scholarship as long as you are a student here in good standing. And if good standing, you're a student here. So as long as you're a student here, you will remain. You will maintain that scholarship. We also have some eligible, loans that students can apply for. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and she's going to touch on some of our loan opportunities as well as some of our opportunities for assistantships within some of our centers.
I'm just going to go through this really quickly because a lot of this information is online, and I want to make sure that we get to all of your questions that you may have for us. So all students are eligible for loans, both international and domestic students. It is you go through a separate process through the financial aid office, and there's detailed information on our website on how to apply for those loans, how to apply for financial aid. International students can get loans without a U.S. cosigner. I believe that we're pretty unique in that option. We also have opportunities for students to have research and teaching assistantships. I wouldn't say that will fund your MBA experience, but it's a great opportunity to supplement some of your cost of living expenses. The other opportunities we have is through our center fellowships, and if you go to our website on the main admission site, it will talk about how to fund your MBA, and the center fellowship application and center fellowship experiences are listed there, and so I'd encourage you to look at those. We have 3 centers. We have the Emory Center for Marketing, Center for Alternative Investments. We have Social Enterprise at Goizueta, and then we have the Marketing and Analytics Center. So I would encourage you to look at those, see if any of those may be of interest to you. It's not as much of the remuneration as it is about the experience that you'll gain and the access to faculty members and the projects that you'll be working on. Our students who have been fellows are very successful in utilizing those experiences and transitioning and talking about them in the job experience. So I would encourage you to look at those. You do need to submit a separate application for the center fellowships, and you want to do that in the same round in which you're applying. I think those are probably the main points, and we'll just get to questions.
Yeah,
now.
actually, there aren't as many questions as expected. We got a lot of information on this, and I think it's because you guys have been very mindful of using the web, which we appreciate greatly. But just going to the area of the center fellowships, before we kind of leave that topic, we'll work backwards to talk a little bit more about the general fellowships. But the center fellowships, what type of information specific, if somebody's interested in getting into alternative investments or social enterprise, do they need to have demonstrated that they've done that before, or just an interest in that to be considered for it? What would make you a better or a more qualified candidate for a center fellowship?
Sure. I mean, I think it can be a combination of both, but if you're just really passionate about it, I think that is really what's key. The directors of these centers actually review those applications and make those decisions. So I think showing that you have a passion for that particular topic and that the research and activities that they're doing within that center is what's really key.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's important to note, I mean, the interest here is not just to have a way to kind of, fund or access when you're in the program, but really being able to be interested in the area and the effort of what they're trying to do. And these are some really great opportunities to really work alongside some great topics and great individuals.
Well, one thing I want to mention is, you probably would only apply to one. If you're going to show that passion, don't be, it'd be a concern if you applied to all 3. So definitely focus in on your passion and your interest.
Absolutely.
Focus on one.
That makes sense. And then in terms of talking about student loans and financial aids and other elements of it, how soon after an individual applies or is admitted, how soon would you tell somebody to get started in understanding the financial aid process so they can think about the prospect of going to school and how they should fund that?
Sure. Well, I know of very few instances where our students' need is not met through the combination of scholarships and financial aid. So I would encourage them to get started as soon as they know their decision. We set tuition rates in January, I believe, late January of every year. And so once that is set, the financial aid office can begin to work with you. But I would encourage you not to be, here again, be proactive, but don't be stressed that if you're applying and getting a decision in March that you're not going to be having opportunity to secure the funds that you need, because they're very comfortable with working with individuals applying to both the 1 and the 2-year program up until the time the program starts. to get the funding that you need. So I would encourage you, here again, work as quickly as you can once you get the acceptance package, but again, there's no rush because most of the need is met, and it does happen up until the program starts.
Great. I think that's about it, and I want to make sure that I leave a couple, at least a little bit of time for us to have anything else in here. It is really right at 1 o'clock, so if there are other questions we haven't tackled here on air, again, we'll get a little bit of those submitted and answered right off air. I want to thank Katie and Libby for joining us today, and for you for joining us as well to talk about this. I think our chats are a great opportunity for prospective students from around the country and around the world to be able to sort of hear what's happening inside the committee and at the school as well. So hopefully this was informative and helpful for you. And we thank you for joining us and hope you have a great week.